All right. So it looks like my problems with YouTube Live have been resolved. I hope so. What ended up happening yesterday was it. I need to mute that. What ended up happening last night was I'm not exactly sure where the issue was. It might have been something with RTMP. I don't think it was my network connection, but it ended up dying after about a minute of going live. And it happened both times with the original stream and also with the second one that I did. So I knew that it was pretty much time to bag it at that point. And that's why when I put the poll up on Twitter originally, it was like, okay, how about I just do it on Twitch? I know Twitch works. But then I thought, I wanted to do it on YouTube Live because YouTube Live has much wider reach. It's more people have the YouTube app installed on their phone or are comfortable going to the YouTube website to go to catch something. So I figured that would be a smarter thing. So I tested a little bit today after I remembered that I could set a live stream to private for testing, which obviously helps. So that's pretty much the explanation there. But the reason that I wanted to do this, when I was in J school, one of the things that we would do after a newscast is we would do a postmortem. And a postmortem is just you sit around the table, you go over what happened in that newscast, and you talk about it. I also did it for sitcom TV, where you would sit around with the writers and you would sit around with the actors and you would watch through the episode and you would basically give notes and you talk about what worked, what didn't, all those kinds of things. It's just the kind of thing. It's helpful after because you go through the process to make something, right? And you're in the weeds and you're writing and you're performing, whether it's a newscast or whether it's an episode of television, and you don't necessarily get that perspective until you can sit and watch it and also watch it with the people that you made it with so that you can get more of a feel for that aspect of it. So that was basically it. And, I like to talk. That's always fun. I don't know if people necessarily care to listen, but if anybody does, I'll leave this up here for people to watch later if they want to as well. That's one thing that no matter what happens with the show, one thing I will absolutely never ever do is remove the episodes that have been made from the internet. Like, if I decide not to continue, when my contract with my hosting provider ends, I will transfer everything over to a free hosting provider so that it stays there in perpetuity, and everything will also stay on YouTube forever, because it's really, really desperately uncool to take something down that so many other people have put their heart and soul into. Like, if it was just me talking, like if my podcast was just me talking about things, then who cares, right? I'm the only one that's affected if I take it down. But when you have a cast of people that have, been every bit as passionate about it as I've been, then it's completely unfair to them to do something like that. And that is something, there's lines that I won't cross, and some of them are obvious ones. That's maybe one that's not necessarily all that obvious, but that's something that I would never, ever do. It's incredibly uncool to do something like that. And I've seen it happen. Somebody in a fit of pique decides to just go scorched earth, whether it's a disagreement with a collaborator or they're just mad about something. And I get mad about stuff, don't get me wrong, but I try to only harm myself when I when I get mad like that. I'm not I'm not perfect, but there are at least a few things that I that I haven't. Some lines that I won't cross. But anyway, enough about that. That's not what anybody wants to tune in for. So yeah, season 2 complete. It 10 days ago now it's been, and that was one thing that I wanted to do before I scheduled this. I wanted to make sure that I gave people enough time to watch it, because not everybody watches. Like, looking at our numbers, our biggest single download day is usually release day, which is normal because if people have it set to automatically download in their podcatchers, regardless of when they listen, it's going to download right when it releases. So that's totally normal. So at first I thought, well, I'll just do it that Wednesday, but that's only 2 days. Well, 3 days, I guess. So I thought, well, give it a week and a half, and a week and a half is enough. And yesterday was a week and a half. So I think that's a good amount of time. Obviously, before I say anything, I will note there will be spoilers. So if you haven't listened to season 2, just be forewarned. I'm not only going to deal in spoilers. I'm not only going to talk specifically about things that happened in season 2, but those things are going to come up as a natural part of this. And I also have to remember to stop looking at my monitor and to look up at my webcam, which is on top of my monitor. I don't have in my full studio setup, when I have everything set up, I have a teleprompter and I look directly into it. But here, like, this is basically my streaming setup. So you can see I don't have my good mic, and I just have it set up for comfort. I'm sitting in an office chair and looking at the monitor when I should be looking at the camera. And you would think with my Syracuse Newhouse School education that I would remember that, but it's been a long time since I was in school. So hopefully my professors will forgive me for that. So anyway, like I said, let's talk about season 2. So I think a good place to start with season 2 is how season 2 differed from season 1. Season 1 was, I think, a much more traditional kind of Fallout audio drama podcast. And I think a more traditional existing IP, I hate using the F word, fan fiction. I think it was a much more traditionally told story in terms of something based on an existing IP. I had a lot more tie-ins. It was very firmly set in that universe. And as much as I avoid fan service, or try to avoid direct fan service, there was a little bit more of that, little nods to things in the lore that I didn't necessarily have as a central part of the story, but the kinds of things that I liked throwing references into. And one area that in season 1 where that kind of worked out was I knew that I wanted to use the brain control technology, because one of the big set pieces that I wanted to have was the big thing in episode 7 of season 1 where Beth was inside her own brain and she had to find her way out. That's something that I wanted to do for a long time, and that was sort of the hero piece of season 1. That was the one thing that I really wanted to do. That was the biggest thing. I wanted to have the heroic speech, the Henry V speech, which Beth did in episode 9, and then the other thing that I wanted to have was the goodbye message. So as long as I worked those things in, I knew I was going to be happy. But where the synergy came in was I was able to use pieces of Fallout lore to tie in to the brain control technology. And I had to massage it a little bit. Like, it's not... that technology does not exist directly in the Fallout universe. Like, there's no brain tech that allows you to go into someone else's mind and root around. I know there's some of the stuff in Fallout 4, which is similar to that, but that was more in line with the synth stuff and synth implants, which was not part of this. What the real inspiration for this was, and I've mentioned this here and there, is the movie Brainstorm, which was a movie that came out in the early 80s. It starred Natalie Wood and Christopher Walken, I think. I know Natalie Wood was in it, but Ira David Wood, no relation to Natalie Wood, was also in it. And Ira David Wood, Tony Award winner, is somebody who directed me on stage, but I loved the movie well before I ever met him. He's Evan Rachel Wood's dad. Awesome guy, serious legend around here, and legitimately one of the coolest, nicest people you will ever meet. He is awesome. But anyway, a big thing in that is that the whole crux of the story of that was there was technology where you could record what someone was experiencing on a tape, and then you could play it back and experience it. So that's I lifted that basically from Brainstorm and then brought it in, and then I made it a little bit more insidious. There were implications in there that I didn't talk about directly, but it was Vault Tech, so nothing Vault Tech does is above board. So there were different things that could have been done, and I alluded to them, didn't talk about them directly. Some of the stuff is in the show Bible, but it wasn't the kind of thing that I wanted to necessarily talk about directly because it's not that kind of show. And that's where that came from. But then, as I was researching lore, I knew about the memory loungers that were in Fallout 4, so that led me down the rabbit hole of the Visiontrons from Fallout 3. There was some stuff in New Vegas that was also related to that technology. I was like, okay, so there's a lore basis for for this technology. So, but that's the way I approached it. I think most people, certainly in the Fallout space, and I think in any space where you're dealing with an existing IP, I think that people start with the lore, right? And they want to, and they build out from the lore. Where I kind of went in the other direction, where I had a story I wanted to tell, and I had story beats, and I had technologies and situations or whatever, and I tied that into the lore. So I came at it from the other direction, and I think that that kind of bears out in the way that things played out in the story in both seasons. And I'll talk a little bit about even the difference there between the two seasons. I think one of the things I figured out over the course of season 1 was I am not the kind of storyteller that's going to enrapture the Fallout community in the way that other creators do. And I knew that, so I had two options. I could either, I don't want to use the word pander, but I could have pandered and really just gone whole hog in and just tied in and just told, just really dove into the lore and approached it from that way. And I want to be careful to say, when I talk about pandering, I am very much not saying that other creators in the space who approach it from that way are pandering. What I'm saying is if I did it, I would be pandering because that's not my natural method of storytelling. So if that's the way you tell stories, that's great. That's awesome. But if it's not and you do it that way, then you're doing something that's not true to you or the way that you want to tell a story, and that's when it verges into pandering. So if I did it that way, that's what it would be. And I'm very averse to doing that kind of thing. I don't like doing that kind of thing. I'm not comfortable with it. But in any case, the big thing is, knowing that I wasn't going to approach it that way. The other way to approach it is what I said. I have a story that I want to tell. I have the universe that I want to tell it in, and I'm going to approach it with that story first. One of the things that makes me feel good about that is, and this obviously is something that came out well after I started production on the show, was Todd Howard was talking about how they're approaching the Fallout TV show. Hey, Vid, hi. Thank you for being here. I'm just talking about approach. That's what we're talking about right now. But thank you so much for being here. You make for anybody who's watching this either live or on the replay, because like I said, I will leave this up for people to watch later. Vit is not just I'm wearing a hat because I need a haircut, and I did not want to subject anybody to the horrors of my hair. I look like John Lithgow in Buckaroo Banzai right now. It's not at the point where if I let it get really out of control, I look like a 19th century president. It's not quite that bad yet, but I definitely need to get a haircut this weekend. So I figured I'd do the Psycho Bunny hat today. The other hat that I have out is my Expos hat. But yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know, Vitriol plays Odessa in the show. But beyond that, she is also a co-producer. She gives an incredible amount of feedback in terms of the writing. She has been a sensitivity reader for the show. And she's a person, speaking of hats, who wears a lot of them in terms of the show. And it's not an exaggeration on my part to say that her involvement with the show and her meeting her through the show has been the thing beyond anything else, beyond awards and beyond loot bags from Bethesda and all that stuff, which, don't get me wrong, those things are awesome. Meeting her and becoming her friend is the best thing that has come out of this for me. The other stuff is great. But I told Lawrence, who does the Modus Files, very early on, yes, I want success. Yes, I want a lot of people to listen. I want recognition, all those things, right? But what I really want, I guess the core of what I really want is acceptance and community and that kind of thing, to have pride of place in a fandom or a community like the Fallout community. And that, that part of it, that sense of community is something that's very important to me in all the online spaces that I've been in throughout my life. And I mean, I've been on the internet for a long time. I started when I was an undergrad in 1990. That was when I first got on the internet when I was an undergrad, and I immediately fell in with an online community. And that has played out over the years in different kinds of communities. I started with mushes because there was no World Wide Web when I started on the internet, and then message boards and forums and all those kinds of things, right? So that's something that's important to me. So that's a long-winded way of saying that it really is the friends you made along the way that makes it worth it. I don't make any money from this. This is all self-funded. I don't monetize. I do have a merch shop, but I think it's important to note that it's important to me that artists are appropriately compensated for what they do. So I paid a license fee to the artists, or came to a different, another kind of agreement before I featured anything in the merch shop, and I will never make that back, not even close. No matter how much merch I will never ever make that back. But that's okay, because the important thing wasn't making money. The important thing was, number one, ensuring that the artists were compensated appropriately, but number two, if people liked the show, that they had the ability to buy a shirt or to buy a sticker or whatever. So it's nice to be in a position where I can do that, where I can self-fund. This doesn't have to be a really expensive operation. You can use free sounds, you can use free music, you can use a free hosting provider. It makes it harder because it's harder to find good stuff. You can use and a lot of people do use Audacity, a free audio editor. But it does grease the wheels a little bit if you have the ability to spend money on things like sound effects and music and those kinds of things, which I do. And I mean, it's not the most expensive hobby in the world either. I have coworkers at my day job that ride motorcycles, right? And a motorcycle, you buy a Harley Davidson. One of my favorite coworker has a Harley Davidson. His wife has one too, and those are pretty freaking expensive, man. And the money that I've spent has been over the course of 2 years. That's a one-time pop for that hobby, or photography, or whatever. Sometimes hobbies cost money, and that's what this is. And it's been a lot of fun. I've gotten a lot out of it, so that's cool. Anyway, to circle back to approach. I mentioned the difference between season 1 and season 2 in terms of the way that I approach those seasons. Now, the overall approach, saying that I didn't start from Fallout and say, all right, well, here's Fallout, and I'm going to figure out a story to tell within Fallout. The way I did it was the other way, which is I have this story, I'm going to figure out how to tell that story within Fallout, right? That part of it didn't change. That part of it was the same through both seasons. However, and I don't know how many people picked up on this, but I diverged a little bit more from Fallout in season 2 than I did in season 1. And I think a lot of that was I had to gain a little bit of a comfort level with me as a storyteller again. So working within an existing IP allows you to operate within certain guardrails. The world building's already been done. And as long as you look at it the way I did, which is, again, this goes back, this is what Todd Howard said about the Fallout TV show. You are telling a new story, but that new story operates within existing canon and does not contradict or violate it. And that's exactly the approach that I took with it. And I took that to another level in the second season, right? Whereas in season 1, all that technology you could tie directly back, and the situations and everything that happened, you could tie directly back to Fallout lore somewhere. Or in the case of, for example, Andrew Kirby being the head of a spycraft education program within the Vault. That's not something that exists within Fallout 76 or any of the other Fallout games, but it's entirely believable, I think. I think it's the kind of thing that Vault Tech would do in a control vault earnestly and not nefariously, because it's the kind of thing that would be useful to people after they leave the vault if they are intended to rebuild society. So that's a good example, I think, of something that doesn't exist within lore but makes sense within existing lore, and it doesn't contradict it. Now, there are people who I ignore. I summarily ignore people like this because they make me tired, and as much as I like naps, I don't want to deal with that. Who will insist that anything that isn't directly referenced in a game or in a companion work that is considered canon, that it's not lore friendly. And I reject that. And anybody who feels that, if my show's not for you, and that's okay. My show is not going to be for everybody. Nobody's show is going to be for everybody. Not everybody's going to like Modus Files. Not everybody's going to like Chad. Not everybody is going to like True Vault Escapades. Not everybody's going to like our show. That's one of the great reasons. That's one of the great things about the fact that there are so many different shows out there that are different storytelling styles. And I mean, just the 4 shows that I mentioned are radically different in terms of tone, the way they tell the story, the style, the approach, as I mentioned. Even though, say, Modus Files and Chad, for example, approach it, they're very lore focused shows, but they could not be more different in the way that they approach how they handle lore. And it's great. You have 2 incredibly creative people behind those shows, and it really does demonstrate a drum that I bang all the time is the Fallout universe has demonstrated itself to be the kind of canvas that you can tell an enormous number of different kinds of stories on. And just the Fallout 76 audio drama space demonstrates that. And that's before you get into other areas, right, with virtual photography or illustrative kind of art or other prose storytelling, all those other kinds of things. There are so many stories you can tell within the Fallout universe. Bethesda and the people that Bethesda, whether it's Interplay, Obsidian, whoever, the way that all these stories have been constructed, it's almost like there was always going to be storytelling surrounding this universe. And now there has been, but now there's official storytelling with the TV series whenever that comes out. So that's pretty awesome. So then in season 2, and part of this was born from necessity, because just like now, as I got to the end of season 1, I did not know if I was going to continue. I did not know if there was going to be a season 2. I was not going to decide until I think I gave myself until the end of June to decide whether or not I was going to do a second season. So I didn't hold anything back, right? Like, it wasn't the kind of thing where, okay, so a good example, Superman 1, Superman 2. Everybody knows, well, you may or may not know, but Richard Donner wanted to save the time travel thing, the flying around the Earth to reverse time, for Superman 2. But the studio didn't want to do that, and that was one of the many things that led to Donner leaving Superman 2. Although I side with Donner in Superman, I did what the studio wanted to do, which is, listen, we don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be anything after this. Like in their case, we don't know if this movie is going to be a hit. It ended up being a massive hit. But, we don't know if there's going to be a Superman 2. I didn't know if there was going to be a season 2 of this show. So I was bound and determined to not leave anything on the table. And I didn't. I could have saved the heroic speech. I could have saved the holotape. In fact, the holotape, the final message from Beth holotape, would have fit in very well in this season. But I wasn't holding anything back. I wasn't leaving anything on the table. Every metaphor you can use, every arrow in my quiver, every piece of ammunition in my gun, I was using all of it, and I did. So that's good, because that means that you're able to fit a lot of stuff into your story in the 10 episode season that I had. The downside is, if you do decide to continue, which I did, so my thought process was, I set maybe midway through the season what I considered to be a completely unrealistic goal, where I said, excuse me, if I get 10,000 total downloads, right, by the end of the season, that will be what I will 100%, I will commit to doing a second season. I considered that to be absolutely unrealistic based on what my numbers were in the beginning of the season, all those kinds of things. I exceeded those by a little bit at the end of the first season, but what that revealed to me was download numbers weren't the only thing that I needed to look at to decide whether to continue. Doing this is hard. It is emotionally draining. It's a lot of work. all those things, right? So there's a lot of calculus that goes into it to determine whether or not it's going to be worth it to you to continue. So despite smashing through my download goal by the end of the first season, I still didn't decide to to come back until a few months after the season ended. So knowing that I was going to approach it that way, leaving my cupboard bare, that meant that I really had to come up with a bunch of new stuff for this season. And keep in mind, the last time before this show that I did anything creative, and this is not, well, okay, outside of music, purely in terms of writing, the last time that I did anything creative before the show was in 1997. And after that, I didn't put pen to paper or fingers to keys to write anything until 2021. Until I did that, one area I think where I differ from a lot of creators, and I guess I don't know. I can't say it's a good thing. Oh, hey, listen, you being here, V, is very important, and I know that you always have a lot of stuff going on. So just the fact that you took time to be here is hits me right there. So thank you. I completely forgot what I was talking about. This is hard. Cupboard was bare. Well, okay. Well, I'll go back to the cupboard being bare. So, in addition to needing to come up with a bunch of new stuff. Oh, I remember now. Sorry. I was talking about the fact I hadn't written anything since 1997. So, I don't write for fun. I don't write as, like, my hobby is not writing. And I know people who just love to write, and that's great. I mean, that's awesome. That people will, it's like visual artists will talk about sometimes how they'll draw things and no intention of ever showing them to anybody. It's just, and it's not even practice. It's just because they love to draw, they love to create, and that's awesome. And writers do that too. And I don't. I cannot motivate myself to write unless I am doing it for a specific purpose, right? I write only for people to consume and enjoy something. I just can't, and I've tried to sit down and actually just write something like, hey, I'm just going to write something. That's cool. Write a story. Never works. I just cannot gin up the motivation to do it. It's just not how I'm wired. I need to have that goal in mind that, hey, I'm writing this because I want people to I mean, I don't really write prose because I'm terrible at it, but I want people to watch this or listen to this, right? That's the kind of thing that motivates me. And because of that, there really wasn't a vector for me in those wilderness years to create anything that people, for people to consume, right? And I mean, audio dramas existed in a somewhat accessible way before I got into it, but it really was Lawrence who said, hey, and Kenny did the same thing for Lawrence. Hey, why don't you make an audio drama and release it as a podcast? Here's how you do it. So I had that motivation then, and I knew I know I'm a good. I know I hate to talk like this, but I know I'm a good writer. Okay, I know I'm a good storyteller. I know how to write people, and I'm not as good at writing plotty plot, as I call it, but I'm still good at that. But where I really make my hay is in writing people, writing their relationships, how they interact with each other, the dynamics of those various relationships, and the different permutations of relationships between all the people that may come across each other in a story, all those kinds of things. I'm confident that I'm good at that. And it was nice in that first season to have those guardrails that I mentioned. It gave me less to worry about, and I could concentrate on knocking the rust off and remembering how to write, because it had been a very long time since I did it. And I have a cat who's encroaching in here. You may see her tail go across. Yep, there it goes. In any case, sorry, she totally distracted me. In any case, that I think really helped. That helped. It helped me to be able to be in a position to tell a story in a way that I needed to. If I had to worry about world building, or if I had to worry about really establishing a bunch of stuff right up front, it would have been a lot harder for me. But then in the second season, I didn't need that as much. So I think I said going into the season, I was like, season 2, let's get weird. And it flows back to that idea that Fallout lends itself to telling so many different kinds of stories that fit. I mean, look at True Vault Escapades, right? That's a noir sort of detective story, and it fits in the Fallout universe. It absolutely does. So that was one indication to me that you can tell the kind of story that I want to tell, and I got weird, and I'm happy with that. I'm glad that I got weird. Some of the concepts were from ideas that I had a very long time ago and never really did anything with, but I was able to weave them in, I think, in a way that worked well. The universe hopping, all those kinds of things. None of that has any basis on Fallout lore. None of it does. But I think that it fits as long as you do it properly, and I think I did it properly. But I guess, I wonder sometimes, and I wondered this throughout the season, did this mean that I wasn't interested, or I shouldn't say, that I wasn't as interested in telling a Fallout story? And I don't think that's true, but I just think I think my comfort level and the reception to the show in terms of awards, in terms of listenership, in terms of feedback, all of those things demonstrated that my approach was something that had legs. So that allowed me to move further in the direction that I had started to move in the first season. But it's almost, I think one of the comparisons that I used is for the first season, in a way it's like a second service in tennis, where you have you're not hitting the ball as hard as you can because you just want to make sure that you hit it inbounds. And I think in a lot of ways that's what I was doing in the first season. So the second season, I had some of those training wheels off, and it worked. I mean, shows generally grow, so I can't say whether or not the growth of the show was natural growth or how much it was helped by getting weird, right? That there is a stigma, and I'm not going to say who I had this conversation with because it was a private conversation, but there's a stigma that impacts stories based on video games. And I know that there is a stigma based on stories told within an existing universe as well. Both of those things are real. So I think the fact that we got recognition from outside the gaming community. So, in fact, if I'm being honest, we got more recognition from outside the Fallout community than from inside the Fallout community. Despite those roadblocks, despite that, people really looking down on existing IP-based properties and really even more looking down on video game-based storytelling. The fact that we have been able to get as much engagement and the fact that we've been able to have the numbers we've had and the award recognition that we have, in spite of that, is pretty great. So, I guess part of the reason, maybe subconsciously, and I guess it was even consciously, part of it was I wanted to prove to myself that I was a good writer. Because the reason I stopped writing back in '97 was I had a pitch for a TV show, and I still think it's a strong concept. And actually, it was a strong concept, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But that pitch got no play, right? It got zero traction. Nobody wanted to touch it. So I thought, okay, it's clear that I'm not going to be able to make this a career. So I'm going to concentrate on my day job. I'm going to have a good career there, and I've done that. I have, I'm in my 9 to 5 is, I've been successful at that. I'm not rich, But I have a comfortable middle class existence, which is awesome. And I just kind of shoved that whole creative thing off to the side. But it always did bother me. I just you never know. Like I always felt like I was a good writer. I felt like I had good ideas, but when they don't get any traction, well, maybe you have to face the fact that maybe you're not. So this was another whack at that. An opportunity for me to get out there, tell a story, and now I didn't have to worry about convincing a studio to make it. I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. I put it out there, and it would stand on its own. Succeed or fail, I couldn't blame anything other than the quality. And that was great. So to tell you why I know that concept has legs. And before I start, I want to be extremely clear here. I am absolutely not saying that I think anybody stole the idea, because I do not think that's the case. I am as certain can be that this was just something that happened, synergistically, I guess. And maybe I was just a little bit early, but there ended up being two shows that were similar to my pitch, that approached it in slightly different ways, that ended up being made, and were one was very successful, one was not as successful as it should have been, but it was very highly critically acclaimed. Those two shows are News Radio and Sports Night. News Radio, of course, was more of a screwball, traditional workplace sitcom. Sports Night was closer to what I was pitching, because it was a comedy, but it was more of, it wasn't quite to the level of a dramedy, but it was a little bit more serious than News Radio was. So I knew my concept was good, and I just it just wasn't the right time, didn't get in front of the right people, whatever. But in any case, that's why I stopped. So that was that. But there's a lot of other stuff that goes into this. I mentioned that this whole process it's difficult. It's one thing that you have said to me, and I hope I'm not telling tales out of school, but you're absolutely right about it, is, well, I'll put it this way. It's important to understand and to frame what success is, and to be realistic about it, and to celebrate your victories, and to take your successes, and don't just shove them off to the side and then find some other way that you're falling short and concentrate on that and dwell on that. And that's something I'm not good at. You, V, have been a shining star in terms of getting me to recognize that, and I am much better at it than I have ever been in the past because of you. But it's still the kind of thing that it's who I am. I'm very rarely satisfied with anything. and I say that I say that in terms of myself, right? Like I don't want people to think that I'm saying, oh, I'm not satisfied with my kids. I love my kids. My kids are amazing. My kids are incredible, despite me being their father. So things like that. It's hard to put into words. I always want to achieve more or to reach higher, and I will continually set goals that I feel are unrealistic, and then I keep meeting them. And I'm not. That sounds like a brag, and I don't mean it to be a brag. Another example of that, I told you about the download numbers for the excuse me, for season 1, right? I mentioned that. Well, I also said the Signal Awards, right? I entered us into the Signal Awards, and I was like, there is no way in hell we're gonna get anything out of this. When I first entered, I didn't know what the playing field there was going to look like, and then I saw the kinds of organizations that entered, and it's all these big studios, and I'm like, well, okay, so I have an independent project that is completely self-funded, that uses all volunteer talent, that is based on an existing IP, that is a video game existing IP. So I thought, okay, fine. Hey, nothing ventured, nothing gained. It's a lesson learned. I'll know better for next time. And then we won 2 best writing awards out of it. It's things like that. Like and now, like, in terms of download numbers, and numbers are not everything. One thing that I complained about, and it's one of those things where when you have the perspective, you understand. But I always complained that all the people, when I was talking about, my God, my download numbers are terrible. People would always tell me, listen, download numbers are not everything. Don't concentrate on that. Concentrate on telling a good story. Be confident that you're doing that, and let everything flow from there. And I always said, well, you know what? The only people that ever say that are people that have big numbers. It's like, the comparison I used is, it's like Jeff Bezos saying, hey, listen, man, money's not everything. Well, yeah, of course you don't think money's everything. You have it, and you don't have to worry about it. And now we have relatively good numbers. We're around 170,000 total downloads. And I'm sitting here like, you know what? Numbers really aren't everything. So I guess I have, to quote the Untouchables, I have become what I have beheld. And yeah, I mean, 170,000 downloads is good for a show that is really a boutique show that only has a total of 20 real episodes and 2 special episodes. I think that's good. 22 episodes, 170-ish thousand downloads for a video game fan fiction story. Again, I hate using the F word, but it's less clunky to say it that way. Yeah, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think anyone would listen, or at least if I didn't think that we had a shot at people, at it catching on and people listening. And one thing that helped there was we had so much support, and have so much support from the community. The show has an incredible amount of support. Lawrence, obviously, massive supporter from the beginning and still is. Kenny provided, and I shouldn't be saying things in the past tense. Kenny has always provided a lot of advice, direct support. We have an incredible amount of support, so I knew that part of it was going to help. But you never know. And looking at our original numbers, we had, like, when we released our first episode, we had 100 downloads in our first week. But then what people told me, and people who had the perspective of having had released things previously, said, excuse me, I'm so sorry that I'm clearing my throat so much. They said, listen, this stuff doesn't usually take off immediately. And something that Tom from Robots Radio said was, this stuff has a long tail because it's evergreen content. It's not topical. You're not talking about the debt ceiling. This is a story, and it's a story that's it's going to be not timeless as such, but it's not dependent on something that's happening right now. All those kinds of things. So that part of it is something that now, I guess it's not that I didn't want to believe people when they told me this kind of thing, but it's like, well, yeah, okay, every show is successful except the ones that aren't. It's survivorship bias. People talk about, and I rode the back of a pickup truck when I was younger, and we saw, we all drank from the hose, and we rode in the back of the pickup truck, and we sat in a car with the windows up and 17 people smoking in it for 14 hours a day. And we all survived. And like, well, yes, we all did survive. And all the people who didn't survive are not here to talk about how they didn't survive. It's the same kind of thing. All the people that are existing and operating in the space that are talking about these things, that are relating their experiences, are people who have been successful. And the road is littered with the corpses of shows and other creative endeavors that didn't catch on. So, I always keep that kind of thing in mind. But we're doing great. And this is another thing that I don't, it gives me angst. Because, so, most of the creators in the indie community, the indie audio drama community outside of Fallout, as well as in the Fallout creative community, there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my gosh, like interrelation. Like, people within the community love the stuff that's being created, right? And they will talk about it. There will be direct organic engagement. There will be feedback for like Modus Files is a great example. Lawrence does a great job of engaging with community. People in the Fallout community adore that show, and they should, because it's an awesome show. And I'm not just saying that because I played 6 characters in it so far. Even if I was not involved with it in any way, I would tell you that it is a great show because it is amazingly well written. It's very well performed. The story itself is laid out in a brilliant way. It's a great show, and it gets so much recognition from within the Fallout community. The people within that specific fandom and that specific community really responded to it. We don't have that kind of engagement. And don't yell at me yet, V. We don't have that level of engagement within the community itself yet. Bethesda loves what we do. That's the disconnect, the part that I don't know how to interpret, and I don't know how to feel about it. The only other audio fiction show that Bethesda has ever acknowledged or directly promoted is Chad and us. So the people from on high think that we're doing something awesome. That's amazing. That is one thing. That wasn't even an unrealistic stretch goal for me. Well, I guess it kind of was, but it wasn't something that I ever even unrealistically expected to happen. Awesome Ninja, thanks so much for being here. And yeah, absolutely. Our shows kind of exist in the same universe, and even though they're wildly different in terms of tone, storytelling, they really are in the same family. And it's great to have Modus Files, people who start with the Modus Files come over and join us. And I know Lawrence, as I said, Lawrence has gone so far out of his way to help us and to promote us. Our promo is in every one of his episodes, all that kind of thing. And he calls us out and mentions us. So yeah, so that all the people that have discovered us through the Modus Files, that's been a huge vector in terms of our growth as a show. And yeah, that's the thing, V, about this community. The audio drama community is the same way. Everybody in this community wants everybody else to succeed and will work hard to make that happen. Like, creators who do different things, or even creators who do the same thing, will fall all over themselves to help other creators, myself included, and that's awesome. It's really nice to see. Nobody in this space, it doesn't feel like anybody thinks they're competing with each other, and that's rare. It's great. I love that. The level of support that we show for each other, and a lot of times I feel like I don't do that as much as I should. And a lot of it is because I don't feel like I have the standing within the community to move the needle. I'm that's the thing with me. I am very much, I only put myself into situations, and I only take part in any kind of efforts or anything like that if I feel like I can genuinely help. If I can move, if me being there moves the needle, then I'll do it. So I guess sometimes I get racked with doubt that, who cares if I'm talking about this thing? So I am reluctant sometimes to put myself out there, because I feel like if I do that without having that kind of standing, it makes it look like I think I have it when I don't. And I know that's weird and it's twisted, but perception is a big thing with me, and I live in mortal terror of people thinking that I think that I'm bigger than I am, or that I'm more than I am, or that I'm better than I am, or that there's some kind of arrogance or any of that built into how I look at things or how I approach things. I am scared to death of that. So what that usually ends up resulting in is me pulling back. I will sometimes volunteer for stuff, especially if it's Kenny. Like if it's something with Kenny, I will lay down on railroad tracks for that man. I will do anything he ever needs me to do, and he's been awesome about like he's invited me to do 2 Junkashine runs for charity, and I have been so appreciative. It's been a blast both times. We won the first time. Lawrence and I won the first time. Second time we didn't, but it was still great. It was still a lot of fun, and we raised money for charity, and that that kind of thing is great. But what I'm getting at is, I do feel sometimes like I don't step up to the extent that other people do. And I do that not because I feel like I'm above it, or that it's not worth my time to do that, because I don't feel that way. It's really the opposite thing, where I don't want to I don't want it to look like I'm assuming I have pride of place where I don't. And I know none of this makes sense. This is all dumb and weird. I am well aware of that. But it's just one of those things. And by the way, Northern, thank you very much for being here. I was on a long-winded point, and I've learned that if I stop in the middle of one of my long-winded points, I forget where I am. I guess it's one of the pitfalls of old age, that I forget things. But yeah, I mean, what you do is an example of the Fallout universe being perfect for the telling of wildly different kinds of stories. Like, I never would have thought to do what you're doing. Like, that would never have occurred to me to do something like that. Yet, it fits in with Fallout lore, right? And we've talked about this because there are annoying people, in my opinion, who turn their noses up and like, well, people wouldn't have stage plays in the Wasteland after the bombs dropped. And I'm like, okay, put down New Vegas for 5 seconds and look at human history and look at what people have done in the face of apocalyptic horrors, right? The Black Death, World Wars, all of that stuff. People, this is exactly the kind of thing that people did all the time. And it makes perfect sense that after the bombs dropped in the Fallout world that they would have done it. So it just it makes me tired. Again, love naps, hate being made tired like that. But yeah, and beyond that, it's another example of how the community comes together to create something that is more than I think that it would be otherwise. So you have you are you write and adapt. You have the overall vision of how you want this story to play out, how you want it to work within Fallout, or if it's just going to be like when we did Macbeth, that was a straight up stage production of Macbeth. And then as you, I think, got more comfortable with the way that you were doing it, you made it more Fallout based. But then where the magic really happens is you get people like Ray to do the cinematography. You get people like Papa Gator to do the sets. You have all of these things that play together in a way where it really does end up being a lot more than the sum of its parts. So you have this out of left field concept that is just amazing. And then you have the people that are able to come in and build those sets and do basically what amounts to live machinima. And it's done in a way that really does evoke. I mean, I've done a ton of stage productions in my time. It really does evoke that backstage feel of doing a real stage production. Like in terms of, you got to find your mark and you places, and you got to have, you got to know when to come in, know your entrances, know your exits, all that kind of stuff. And it's crazy how it all comes together. And it always comes off looking like $1,000,000. And that's a testament to the way that you approach it. The people understand your vision. And I think that's the kind of thing that I talked about Ira David Wood. When he directed me, I had never been directed before or since by somebody like that. Like I said, the man is a Tony Award-winning director. And just having that kind of energy at the center of a production is something that is like, wow, that's really, I've worked with other good directors, don't get me wrong, but this guy was like miles above anybody that I ever worked with, which is not saying bad things about the other directors I've worked with. It's just talking about how amazing he is. So I get the same kind of vibe from you, because you're able to not just express your vision, but people get it without you even having to necessarily explicitly discuss it. and tell people this is my vision. People get it just from the interactions in any of the productions that I've been in. Now, I talk about only wanting to take part in things where I feel like I move the needle. You know, the thing that I am very conscious of is, number one, I'm not good at everything. Nobody is. And that's not me talking myself down. Nobody's good at everything. Kenny, the most amazing creator I know, isn't good at everything. And it's important to deploy yourself in areas where in doing things that you are good at. And that doesn't mean don't grow and don't try new things. It just means understand and have the right perspective as you're working on those kinds of things. And the other part is understand that you are not always going to be a person who moves that needle. And it's not because you're a bad person, and it's not because you suck. It's just not every situation is one where you're going to where you're going to have that kind of an impact. Because what you do and the way you do it may be awesome, but it might not be the kind of thing that can really, and I know I keep saying move the needle. It's, if I could think of another way to put it, because it's probably annoying to hear it, but you're not always going to be able to move that needle in everything you're involved with. So that has made me, not as a creator so much, but as a participant in various creative endeavors, a little bit more picky. Because I am, again, this is another thing I live in moral terror of. I don't want to take up space in an area where I'm not helping. I don't like to be somewhere where I'm just taking up space. That's why, like, when I did stage stuff, depending on the show, if I felt like I wasn't making the audience's experience better, and in a way other than, boy, does this set look great. Like when I did Death Trap, the set that they built for Death Trap, amazing. I mean, maybe the best set that I've ever worked on. Like, it was awesome. But if I felt, and to be clear, I don't think this. I played Clifford in that production of Death Trap, and I think it went really well. It was a great cast. I think I did really well. I'm proud of my performance. So I think I did move the needle there. But if I felt like I wasn't moving the needle any more than that partner's desk or that fainting couch, then I'm not going to do it. It's not worth my time, and it's not worth the production's effort and belief in me or whatever to do that if I'm not moving the needle more than a set piece. It's just how I am. Like, the way that I put it is, I don't want to be the guy at karaoke who keeps grabbing the microphone and nobody wants to hear him sing. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be unwelcome in that way. So that's why I'm picky about the kinds of things I do. It's not because I think I'm above any particular production or any particular creative endeavor or whatever. It's because I don't want to let anybody down, and I don't want to put people in an uncomfortable situation. I'm a big personality. I suck a lot of air out of any room that I'm in. So if I'm involved in something, that kind of thing will inevitably happen. So I think that has to rise to the level, or my performance and my involvement in something has to rise to the level that justifies that. I work hard. I don't try to do anything that would negatively impact, but it's just my personality. It's who I am. I'm a big personality. It's just, and I'm sure this video is really showing that I've been very subdued through this whole thing. As much as I like talking, sometimes it can be difficult, but yeah, and really, Northern, that was one of the things that I learned. Just like in my case, is figure out the story you want to tell and tell it. Don't worry about the other stuff, because if you worry about the other stuff, then you're not going to tell the best story that you can tell. And with your productions, it's the same thing. Figure out what your vision is, and do that, full throatedly, right? Do not compromise, and things are going to be okay. It's when you compromise and when you start thinking about that ancillary stuff that you get in trouble. And that was another thing that I'm very proud of with this show, is I straight up refused to compromise. I did not, absolutely was not going to compromise. There are things that I could have done. There were, story aspects that I could have put in. There were people that I could have brought in. I could have done things like that, but that would have compromised the way that I wanted to approach what I was doing, and I am not comfortable with doing that. Again, the way that this show is, at the end of the day, I'm the person who's responsible for this show, so I have to satisfy myself in terms of how things are executed. I can't worry about pleasing other people, except in that more general sense where everything that I do is I want people to enjoy what I'm doing. I want to move people. That's my main focus whenever I do any kind of storytelling, is I want people to feel things, right? I want to move them emotionally. But what I mean is, there are, and it goes back to pandering. There are things that if I had done them, they would have fallen into that pandering realm, and I didn't do that. And I could have, especially when the numbers weren't great in the beginning. I could have done some stunt casting or whatever that might have drawn some extra earballs to the production. But I was like, you know what? If I do that, I'm just going to feel gross, and it might not even work. And I don't know if it would have worked. Maybe if I had done that, then we wouldn't have had the kind of growth that we ended up having. Who knows? I don't know. It's and V, you're right. Ignoring the people that are no fun that's been one of the easier parts of this for me. The people that oh, that's not lore friendly. Well, I ignore them without an issue. There are ways to hurt my feelings. There are a lot of ways to hurt my feelings. That's not one of them. Like that, I will just, if you say that and I am confident that something does fit within lore or fits within the Fallout oeuvre more than anything, then I will just dismiss what that person says out of hand, and I will dismiss what that person says moving forward too. And that's happened with certainly one person that complained about the theater company productions. That led me to not completely, but almost completely dismiss everything that he's said moving forward. And I think that's probably the right call, because he kind of sucks. I'm not going to mention names. I don't do that, but you probably know who I'm talking about. Sorry, it's just thirsty work. But yeah, so that going back to what I was talking about before. So we have that recognition, that engagement from from higher levels, and I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, this is better. I don't mean it like that. I just mean, Bethesda itself recognizing what we have done and sending me amazing care packages of Fallout merch, which is just awesome, and directly promoting us and giving us stuff to do giveaways to promote the show as part of the Fallout 25th anniversary stuff, right? So we get recognition like that almost nobody else does. But I have always felt that the boots on the ground, the Fallout community itself, hasn't latched onto us to the same degree that they have to other shows. That's not to say that we have not been supported, and I said that before. We have had an incredible amount of support from the community, because, like I said, everybody in the community wants everybody else in the community to succeed, and will bend over backwards to do everything they can to make that happen. That's not what I mean. But when I changed the focus of our marketing, and also when I shifted the focus of the writing a little bit to not worry so much about those direct lore tie-ins and those call-outs, that's when our growth really exploded. And that's when we got a ton of engagement and listenership from outside of the video game space and outside of the Fallout space. But the other thing is, there's one thing I can't talk about, but the other thing is, like the Signal Awards. I mentioned the Signal Awards. We didn't get any. We didn't get a lot of recognition in awards where there was a public vote, or ones that had where things were geared more toward indie podcasts, right? The indie audio drama space. Yet, when we went up against the big boys, big studios with millions of dollars in funding and literal Hollywood stars in their casts, we won awards. So it's weird that we get like we are highly successful in those in areas where we really have no business competing, but it's not reflected as much in the sort of the more general creative space where you would expect us to get that kind of engagement. It's just weird. And I, as I mentioned, there's one thing that I can't talk about yet, and I may never be able to talk about it. If nothing comes of it, I will not be able to talk about it. Well, I guess I'd be able to talk about it, but I won't. But if something does come about it, it would be another indication that my audience is not what I expected it to be. It's weird. I don't know. I guess part of it is my style defaults to broad appeal. Excuse me. The way it's just the way I write. Like, I don't intentionally go in and go, oh, I want to write lowest common denominator stuff that a million people are going to want to listen to because it's it's really just total regression to the mean, and it doesn't do anything interesting, but it's going to have that broad appeal, right? I don't do that, but I think just the way that I construct stories lends itself to broad appeal. I guess at their core, the stories I tell are pretty universal, even though the particulars are different. They're about love, and they're about friendship, and they're about family, not in the Dom Toretto Fast and Furious way. But it's those kinds of universal themes I think that resonate with people. I talked about getting weird with the second season. I don't get weird compared to what a lot of people do. Like, there are some incredibly creative people in the indie audio drama space that are doing really just amazing, like off the charts, interesting things. And I envy them for that kind of creativity. It's just not the way that my creative brain works. But some of the stuff they come up with is amazing, and there's some just fantastic shows out there. But I guess because of that, I think maybe that's why. Maybe Bethesda liked what we were doing because of that, because it was universal, and it's pretty safe. I mean, yeah, it centers on a queer romance, but it's a queer romance that is not told from the perspective of the male gaze, and I say that as a male. I mean, I guess it's strange that it worked out that way, but it's the way that I approach that aspect of storytelling. I said early on, the fact that this was a love story between two women, it was only that because that's what the story told me it was supposed to be. I could have very easily made it about a het couple. It would, and I don't think there would have been significant differences in the overall trajectory of that love story. Obviously, there would have been some differences that were in the particulars, but love is love. So there's not at that core, it's not going to be that different. I guess maybe that's what Bethesda recognized, and maybe that's what the Signal Awards recognized, and maybe that's what that other company that I was alluding to, maybe that's what they recognize. But maybe that doesn't lend itself to, maybe I'm just not weird enough, and weird enough in a good way. I mean, I mean that in a complimentary, positive way, to really kind of grab that kind of attention. But it's okay. It's pretty nice. I have to say, I don't like talking like this, but I'm super proud of all of that stuff. Like the fact that Bethesda recognized us, promoted us, gave us stuff. Really, I mean, they went as far as they could with helping us with getting the word out about the show. I mean, this is freaking Bethesda. it's just it's crazy. I asked Kenny very early on when I was naive about how all this stuff worked. I said, "Hey, what do I need to do to get on Bethesda's radar to get them to who do I reach out to? Who do I talk to?" And he was like, "Listen, it doesn't work that way. Basically, they just have to recognize, they have to notice what you've done, and they will reach out to you." And I was like, "Oh, that kind of sucks." And then they did reach out to me, So it actually happened. But it's pretty cool. And thank you, Northern. And that's what I, you talk about normalization, and it's one of the things that I guess it wasn't a conscious focus, but I guess it's just the way that I look at these things. Like I said, it can be trite to say love is love, but really, I don't see a difference between two men loving each other, two women loving each other, or a man and a woman loving each other at the core. I don't see the difference. There is no difference to me. So that what you're saying there, Northern, is you don't notice who the love story's centered on. That's definitely a feature and not a bug. Just because that's it, my viewpoint on that, I think, just comes through because I wouldn't be able to. I don't think I would be able to write it differently. Like, even if I tried, I don't think I'd be able to pull it off, and not effectively. Like, if I tried to make if I specifically tried to make a queer love story, and tried to make it different from how I would approach any other love story, I wouldn't. I don't know if I don't know how I would do it. It's just, I don't know. It wouldn't be worth it either. That's no fun. It wouldn't be fun for me, at least. But again, I'm not someone who would be involved in any of those kinds of relationships, so I also wouldn't have appropriate perspective to tell the story in the kind of way that it would deserve to be told with that kind of a focus. So I'm not saying people shouldn't tell those specific kinds of stories. I'm saying I'm not the right person to do it. And fortunately, I think my approach lends itself to being able to tell those stories well. So that's definitely a positive. That's definitely a positive thing. And the awards that we won are for writing, but it's like winning a Gold Glove in baseball. Offense shouldn't come into it, but voters will look at a guy, and that will creep into their thinking about this person's defense in the Gold Glove voting. So even though those awards were for writing, if I didn't have V, and I didn't have Tish, and I didn't have Lucy, and the rest of the people that have been involved with this production, they wouldn't have considered the writing as good as they did consider it. It's really those performances that brought that writing to life in a way that led the people, those award judges, to go, this is really good writing. It's the way that it works, and I'm obviously very thankful for it. None of this is a secret. I don't think she would be mad at me for talking about this. One of the things that that kind of knocked me on my heels in the second season was I knew that I wasn't going to have Letitia for the first however many episodes. I didn't know how many she was going to be unavailable for at the beginning, and I got to tell you, that woman is one of the most professional people in the way that she conducts herself as a creative person that I have ever met in my life. I mean, she is... I can't say enough about how professional she is. And I've told this story before. Again, this is not a secret. Very close to the end of the first season, when I think I had just finished writing episode 9, she came to me and said, "Hey, listen, I just got a job out of the country. I'm not going to be able to record. I wanted to tell you immediately, I'm probably going to have to be gone in 4 weeks." She didn't have to tell me that. She could have told me, "Hey, I'm leaving in a week and I'm out of the season finale, pal." She could have done that, and she didn't. She, despite the fact that you never know, even if you've worked with somebody, you never know how somebody's going to react when you give them news like that. But she got beyond that and immediately came to me and told me everything and said, okay, hey, this is my schedule, this is what's going on. And her doing that, the consideration and the professionalism that she showed by doing that, allowed me to pull off that season finale. I wrote it in 3 days so that I could get it to her in time for her to be able to record. And she went out of her way, despite being incredibly busy. Like, she had to get a visa, she had to pack, she had to arrange a place to live, all that kind of stuff. But she still went out of her way to find time to record some really emotional stuff and a lot of lines. That saved the show. The fact that she is who she is, and she is amazing. It is impossible for me, and a writer shouldn't say this. I could never find the words to describe how amazing she was through that whole thing. Now, the flip side of that was the contract that she had was for 6 months, and she wasn't 100% sure when she was going to be back, and also there were some things in the hopper, so she wasn't 100% sure when she would be available to record. So that kind of threw me on my back foot, and I had to vamp a little bit for the first few episodes because I didn't know when I'd be able to bring her back in. So she's the lead character. She is the focus character of the show. So having to do that definitely was not necessarily easy, but it allowed me to focus on other characters. Obviously, I leaned on V. I leaned on Lucy. I brought in Maria to do some stuff as Cindy, just to kind of flesh stuff out. Of course, we had the introduction of Derek, which allowed me to take up a lot of space and get that sort of front loaded, to have that aspect of the story sort of lampshaded right in the very beginning. So it worked out. But again, same thing. She kept me in the loop. She told me right away as soon as she knew anything. And again, she was, throughout this whole season, she has been very busy doing a lot of different stuff. She's a professional, and she's busy, and yet she could have bailed. She could have bailed, and I would have completely understood, but she didn't. And the quality of her work didn't suffer either, despite the fact that this is an unfunded passion project, and she, again, she really had to find time to record, and she did, and was amazing at it. And I can't say enough. But these are the kinds of things that we that we deal with, and having people like that is what makes it work. Because I would have been in big trouble if like I said, if she had come to me and said, "Hey, sorry, pal, can't do the last episode. Bye, I'm out of the country." I don't know what I would have done. I have no idea what I would have done. I would have had to write a season finale that did not involve Beth. I don't want to think about it. Fortunately, I didn't have to think about it. I would have done something, but it would not have been great, and it really would have ended the season kind of on a, like a womp womp, as opposed to the really strong ending that I think we had. But yeah, it was something, and those are the kinds of things that having not just a good cast, but a devoted cast, a dedicated cast can really bring to you. And that's the kind of thing. Those are the kinds of things that you remember, in 20 years or whatever. That's the kind of thing that you look back on, like, that was pretty awesome. Like, I'll look back at stage productions I was in the 90s, and I won't remember that much about the show necessarily, but I'll remember how I felt being around those people. And that's the kind of thing that really sticks with you. So it's definitely good that I have had overwhelmingly positive interactions and positive work with people through the course of doing this show, and also through the course of doing other shows that I've been involved with. I did have one person who ghosted me, didn't make me happy, had to work around it, and I did, but I was not happy. I don't like that kind of thing happening. Too bad. He was a really good guy. He was just too busy. And it's the flip side of it. If he would have come to me and said, "Hey, listen, man, I got too much going on. I got to drop out," I wouldn't have been thrilled, but I would have appreciated it, and I would have understood. Like, "Hey, listen, I get it. You're not getting paid for this. I totally understand." But I guess he didn't want to have that uncomfortable conversation, and that happens. And you're right, V. It's very rare, and I've been extremely fortunate to find people who are willing to not only you know, read the lines, but really put their heart and soul into it, and not just you guys, not just the people at the top of the, you know, not just the people above the fold, right? Pretty much everybody that's been involved with this has really worked hard to come in and give their best performance for the show, and that's been something. And you know, and it's not lost on me that they're doing this to help me realize my vision for what I want the show to be. That's a big part of it. You know, so I appreciate that on a personal level too. Like I do not forget that aspect of it. That's a pretty important part of it. But oh, one thing I was gonna say this at the top. I did mention what a postmortem is, and I have mentioned also on Twitter, do not take my use of the term postmortem to imply anything about the future of the show. I have not made any decisions about whether there's going to be a third season. I will not make any decisions about whether there will be a third season, probably on the same timetable that I had last time. So probably not until late June, early July, then I will decide what I want to do. So considering what postmortem means, that does not mean that the show is dead. It just means that's just a, you know, it's a catch-all term for analyzing something after something is complete, and the first two seasons of the show are complete. That's all that means. If I do decide to continue, you guys will be the first to know. I'll make an announcement, and yeah, debrief. That would have been good. But like I said, I don't think you were on it when I started the stream. I talked about it. It's a term that's used in journalism and in entertainment. Like, it's specifically used in these contexts. So that's why I picked that particular one. But in any case, if I decide to continue, I'll make an announcement. You guys will know. I'll do it on Twitter, etc. If I decide not to continue, chances are I probably won't make an announcement, because I think Vit's going to get mad at me for saying this. So I'll take my lumps. If I decide not to continue, unless that thing that I said I can't talk about, if something comes out of that will be a reason why I wouldn't be able to continue. I don't know if anything's going to come. I hope something does. Boy, am I hoping against hope that something happens there, but I don't know. But I wouldn't be able to continue the show if something happened there. But if I decide just to not continue independently of that, part of the reason that I would not do that is that I would think, well, listen, if I feel like people want the show to keep going, and no matter what, I know there will be people that want the show to keep going, but to the extent that it will make it worth to me to put myself through that emotional ringer and to put myself through that work and all that goes along with it, if I don't think people care enough to make, to balance that aspect out, then I will probably be of the opinion that there's no need to make an announcement that it's not continuing. So, you know what I mean? I hope that makes sense. But that's, that's pretty much. So if I decide to continue 100%, I'll make a big announcement. If I don't, because of other things that come up, I will let you guys know. And believe me, if something happens with that thing, and again, I really, really hope that something happens with that, I will explain that part of it. But otherwise, I'll probably just, everything will, and again, this is also something that I said at the top of the show. No matter what, everything will remain online. All the episodes will remain available. Everything will remain on YouTube. It'll remain available on podcast players. Like that stuff will be there forever, or as close to forever as it can be, because it would be unfair of me to dishonor the hard work and the dedication of everybody that's been involved with the show and all of the support that we've gotten to take it off, to go scorched earth. And I would never, ever, ever, ever do that. So it'll always be there for people to enjoy no matter what. But just like last year, right now I'm in my period where I'm just not thinking about it. I don't want to, like I mentioned that it's doing this takes a big emotional toll. If I don't decompress and I'm thinking about that stuff from now until I need to make a decision, then it's going to color my decision because I'm going to be all stressed out. So I'm just stepping back. I'm not really doing anything with it except, certain things come up. Like, Ray was awesome and said, "Hey, do you have a trailer?" And I was like, "Oh, we have the promo." I don't think it's all that great for that kind of a situation. So, I put together a promo. Or if Kenny comes to me and says, "Hey, let's do a Junkashine run for Fallout for Hope," or some other thing for Fallout for Hope, 100%, I'm there. If somebody says, "Hey, we had somebody drop out, can you dive bomb in and do a roll?" I'll do that. But I am stepping away for this period from kind of doing creative things just so I can recharge and so I can decompress a little bit, because Vic can tell you, I put myself through through all this. Like that emotional ringer is entirely self-inflicted, but that doesn't change the fact that I do it, and that it's a thing that happens. So I have to step away from it in order to be able to make the right decision on those kinds of things. But I will say, I love doing the show. I love the show. I think it is good and has continually gotten better. Part of that is me being more comfortable with just writing in general, being more comfortable with the characters, all those kinds of things. But I think a big part of it too is the people that bring these characters to life being more comfortable living in those characters too. So I think we've all continued to get better as we've gotten more comfortable with every aspect of the show. So I think that's, it's great. You watch TV shows, and these are all highly paid professional people, and you will still see, like, watch Cheers, for example. I think Cheers is a good example. As you see them get more comfortable with everything in the show, you see how the show gets better. And I think that's what's happened here. Star Trek The Next Generation is an example where it was really the writing that wasn't great in the first 2-ish, 3-ish seasons. And that kind of stunted the ability of the cast to get into that mode. And then when season 3 hit, it was off to the races, because, again, they're super incredibly talented and devoted people. But you look at any show that's on for any period of time. MASH is a good example, I think, where you will see their comfort level increase, and the quality of their performances, and the quality of the show, and the quality of the way that they operate within that universe just continues to get better and better. And that's, you can't do that in one season. I mean, you can, I guess, but in our case, we also, another thing about us is we don't put out a lot of episodes, and that's, I'm just not, like, Lawrence has the second season of Modus Files is going to have 23 episodes. That man, and Kenny's the same way, has a motor that I cannot believe, because just doing 10 episodes for me is just like, oh my God, I cannot imagine doing more than that. I can barely imagine doing that number. I just don't have the motor for it, or the volume of creativity to be able to put out that much material, and for it to be, I mean, I probably could do a 25 episode season, but it wouldn't be any good. Well, Lawrence can put out a 23 episode season, and it's awesome, consistently all the way through. So yeah, that's not me. But what I'm getting at is that gives us a little bit less time to get comfortable. So if you only have 10 episodes to get comfortable, well, that's a lot different than having 25 episodes to get comfortable for everybody involved. And I guess that's one of the things about prestige television now, because it used to be every show on TV had between 22 and 26 episodes usually for a full season, and now there's a heck of a lot of shows out there that have 8 episodes or 10 episodes or 12 episodes, like Picard with 10 episodes a season. Strange New Worlds, I forget exactly how many it was, but these are much more tightly packed productions than they had been in the past. And I think it's good, because with there's always, like, you watch TNG, there were filler episodes, and that doesn't really happen anymore. And if it does, something's gone terribly wrong. I think that in Picard season 1 especially, there were filler episodes, and there was only a 10 episode season. But the less said about the first 2 seasons of Picard, the better, I think. Maybe I'll do a YouTube video about what was wrong with Picard season 1 and 2, because heaven knows there aren't any of those. But yeah, but that's the thing. I'm one of the things that like I said earlier, one of the things that I wanted to do was prove to myself that I'm a good writer, and I've done that. I feel that I am a good writer now, and the people that have the ability to judge that purely internally, like the people whose opinion on that is determined by fiat and not consensus, I wish I was like that. To have that kind of confidence is awesome, and I see it a lot in the creative space. And man, I wish I had that. But for me to genuinely feel that I am good at something, I need to have that recognition, and I need to have that feedback. I need other people to let me know somehow, whether it's through directly telling me, or in the case of the show, a lot of people listening, that's how I measure that. And it's not necessarily great, right? But it's how I work. It's the applause that keeps me coming back. And I guess there can be the sentiment that ends up being almost vulgar, like you're not doing it for the art. I disagree with that. I think that I don't, and I'm revealing a little something here. I am deeply uncomfortable with referring to myself as an artist. I just don't feel like I've earned that. I never have. But I guess in a way, I do have to push back a little bit on the fact that that I need recognition to prove that to myself, as that being some indicator of having less artistic merit in what I do, because I don't feel that's the case. There are people who approach it in, I guess, what would be in a vacuum considered a more pure way, and that's great. I'm certainly not going to say anything negative about that. That's what works for them, and it's not what works for me. Like I said, I didn't write anything for 25 years because I had no interest in doing something that wasn't going to be a vector to get that kind of reinforcement. But I have that reinforcement now. So no matter what, like you said, V, I have done that. So I've accomplished the big thing that I wanted to accomplish was that, and I've done that. The other thing that I wanted to accomplish, that I also mentioned earlier, is having that pride of place in a creative community. And the two main creative communities that I'm in right now are the independent audio drama space and the Fallout community space. And I don't have that. So, it's okay. You can't have everything. I do think that there's a level of respect for what I do. I do think people respect me as a creator, and they also respect my creations. So that's good. That's definitely something. So it's not all bad. I just didn't quite get to that level of being I'm trying to think how to phrase it, like being a community luminary. Some people that somebody look to, rather than seeing what they've created and respecting that and respecting them for that. You know what I mean? It's more a push than pull, I guess. More active than passive. Like I look at it as one of the ways that I describe it sometimes is it's a difference between being welcome and being wanted, right? Both of these communities are extremely welcoming. They will, as long as you're not a monster, if you're a racist or a homophobe, you will not be welcome. Certainly not by me and not by the rest of the community. But in general, if you're not some kind of a monster, you will be welcome and you will be supported and you will be brought in, and people will welcome you in with open arms, and they will do that honestly. But there's a difference between that. That's the more passive way of it. Like, hey, we're glad you're here. It's the being wanted part that's a little bit different. And that's my internal hang up. Like, I think if I fell into a volcano tomorrow, neither of these communities would notice until they saw it on the news, right? Whereas other creators in the space, that's the kind of thing that would they would notice if someone disappeared. I don't think that would happen with me, and it's okay. Uh, yeah, like I said, I know I have the respect of people within the community, and that's awesome, and that's important. That's a big thing, and that definitely makes me feel good. And I have the other stuff that goes along with that, which is great. So, excuse me, just have to reshift there. Oh, by the way, my shirt. By the way, here I'll stand up a little bit to show you. This was I just got the shirt. See this was the. I'm sorry, I'm under the lights, so I'm sweating a little bit. That logo is for that was the active logo when I was an undergrad at Syracuse. It was only the primary logo for a few years because everybody hated it. We hated it. My class ring, which obviously I don't have my class ring on, but it did not use that logo. It used the old logo, which has the Latin motto, the Latin SU motto, because of because of that. And then they changed. They went to a different one, which I liked, but they got rid of soon after. And now it's just a super boring block S. And everybody asks when I wear a Syracuse shirt, "Oh, is that an NC State shirt?" Even though it's orange and not red. But now it's retro cool, and I got it not because I mean I'm not going to say that I like the logo even now, but it does represent a really wonderful time in my life because I loved my undergrad years. I had a great time, and I look upon them favorably, and this logo reminds me of it. So when I saw it on the Fanatics site, and I put an order in, I had to grab it. But well, and thanks Northern. I appreciate that sentiment, and I know that there are people that look at me like that, and that's awesome. And I don't mean to dismiss or downplay that. I know that Kenny and Lawrence and you and and other folks who are luminaries within the community would consider me their peer, and that's great. But it's all right. I mean, not everybody gets that kind of traction. Oh, well, yeah, yeah, and that was the thing. I mean, that's very nice of Spooky to say. I was proud to have participated in that, and again, it goes back to moving the needle versus not moving the needle. And that was why I decided to not do the most recent one. I was like, you know what, they got a good thing going here. They don't need me, right? It's not, and again, this is want versus need. I know that you guys, I mean, I think that you guys wanted me there. You were happy that I was there. You enjoyed me being there, all that kind of thing. But I don't know that I moved the needle enough from the perspective of, number one, making the performance better, which is the most important thing. That was the thing. I'm a, like, put it this way, what I do, what I feel like I do well, I feel like I'm a good actor. I feel like I'm a good voice actor. I feel like I'm a very good stage actor. I think I'm a really good TV actor, even though I haven't done that in a long time. But the thing is, I didn't get the vibe that was why people were tuning in. I think people tuned in, number one, to see your vision executed. That was the big thing. To see the way that you took these classic stories, whether they were the Shakespeare ones or whether it was Alice in Wonderland, and see how your vision interpreted that to get it on stage, right? I think that was the main thing people wanted to see. The second thing people wanted to see was the set design, and not just the physical builds of the sets themselves, but how those sets were leveraged in a way to make it into an actual honest to goodness stage production. Those are the two big things that I think people wanted to see. So again, I think I'm a good actor. I'm fairly confident about that, and that was something that I knew that I brought to the table. But I didn't feel like that. Boosted the, you said boosting your morale, and hey, that's awesome. I mean, if me being there helped people find their voice, I mean, hey, that's great. That's something I'd definitely be proud of. Oops. But I felt like that wasn't a milkshake that brought any boys to the yard. It wasn't the kind of thing that was important to the production. That having that kind of an actor, and by that kind I don't mean a really good actor. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean somebody who goes in and approaches something legit, and sort of basically taking a stage actor and plopping them into the middle of a performance like that. I don't think that's what people. I I, I don't think people didn't want to see it. I just don't think that was something that they cared about all that much. So, again, I only want to do things where I feel like I'm helping, and I didn't feel like I was. So that's I don't know. The I don't talk about that publicly very much because I don't want to make it sound like uh, I'm saying anything even remotely negative about the productions, because they're amazing, and I think all that has been. Um, well, yeah, I see what you're saying, but that kind of plays into it, right? It's about just doing it, and I think that just doing it is what's valued there. The fact that you have people who are not actors, who are in there, who are hitting their marks, who are saying their lines, right? They're doing it, and it's something that they're not. It's not something that they're experienced with or anything like that. That I think does move the needle, right? I think that does help. I think it helps engagement. I think it helps capture the vision of what you're trying to do, because in a way, like even if you look at it from a lore perspective, the people that are putting on these productions are not going to be professional actors. There's going to be regular people in the Wasteland. So I think that even that part of it fits in a little bit better. But I guess, yeah, it's hard to put into words without sounding bad, I think. But yeah, I just it hurt me. It hurt my heart that that I felt that way, because I felt like I felt like I let you down, because I have something that I'm good at, but that thing that I'm good at doesn't translate into materially improving the quality of the production or the way that production is received, right? Put it that way. So that was my sort of my mental calculus in all this stuff. I always feel bad. I mean, I feel terrible when something like, if I feel like, if that's the perception that I have, it makes me feel bad, because I know how much work you put into it, and everybody puts into it. But you, as the person who, it's your vision being put front and center. So if I'm not honoring that vision, or if I'm not able to honor that vision because of the way that I approach things, or the style of my performances or whatever, then that's that I don't feel great about that. That's kind of uncool. But yeah, but that's it. But that's how I look at pretty much everything. So that's me in a nutshell, I guess. Uh, I take everything personally, and I'm very emotional. And taking things personally is also good. If something, when good things happen, I take those things personally too. But they don't make those things don't make me feel bad. But that was really the thing. I hate letting people down, and that was a situation where I felt like I let you down. So that's kind of where all that kind of thing comes from. But that's we all have our mental hangups, and I guess that's one of mine. So yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, if you're not learning, then at least I'm of the opinion, if you're not continually learning, then you're missing out on a large portion of the fun of it. I mean, I like learning stuff. Like when I started the show, no clue how to do audio editing. I'm not going to say that I'm good at it now, but I can at least competently and efficiently cobble an episode together, in terms of editing, and not want to pull what's left of my hair out. So that's good. I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot in terms of community engagement, because that's something I never really had to do in terms of any kind of creative work. So that's something that I've learned about, and I've learned a lot about myself. Not all of it good, but I've learned a lot about myself. And so it's all these things, and a lot of times it's you're throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. And I tried to do a lot of things just to see what I was good at, like game streaming, right? I tried that. Turns out, not good at it. Virtual photography, same thing. Tried it, really, really genuinely tried it. Not good at it. And that's okay. Like I said before, nobody's good at everything. And you have to try things to figure out what you are and what you are not good at. And I think that, being part of the Fallout community, just as a member of the community, is the kind of thing that it exposes you to things that you would not be exposed to, so you wouldn't necessarily know to try them. So that's definitely been a good thing. Like, I never would have thought to try virtual photography or camp building, another thing that I'm not good at, or all those various sort of gameplay related kinds of things that I never would have tried. None of that stuff would have occurred to me without, if I had just played 76 and not gotten involved with the community. So that's great. And, it's fun to try new things, even if they don't work out. Where the danger comes in is when that becomes something that people are depending on you for, or where you're trying to accomplish something other than just self-enrichment. That's something that I need to do a better job of. I need to do things more for self-enrichment and not because I'm trying to accomplish something beyond that. Like the Fallout for Hope stuff. The reason that I stopped doing Fallout for Hope as a fundraiser was, and this really hurt my feelings. Like, this hurt my feelings bad. The last campaign, first campaign went okay. It went pretty well. I'm proud of it, and obviously St. Jude is a wonderful charity that I'm proud to raise anything for. But the second one went terribly. I really tried. I tried hard. I promoted. I tried to come up with different ideas, and I got one donation for $20. And I thought, okay, $20 isn't nothing, and I certainly appreciated that donation, that somebody was willing to donate that onto my campaign. So it's not like that. But then I did the Modus Files live read, and Lawrence, again, this is another example of Lawrence being awesome. He's like, hey, listen, I want to, I don't have a Twitch channel, he said, so I want to do it on yours, and that will help your fundraising campaign. And I was like, well, great. And again, Lawrence is an amazing guy, always thoughtful in that way. And I did that, and I think that one thing raised $500, $600, maybe more. I forget. But it was like between $500 and $700 in that one thing. And I thought, okay, so the idea that it was not the best time for fundraising, for economic issues, because of timing, whatever, that kind of went out the window, because it's, when you do something and nothing comes of it, and then it's something centered on somebody else and it goes over like gangbusters, well, it's kind of hard not to take away from that the problem is you. So I think that drove home that the problem there was me. So that's, I talked to Kenny about this. I'm happy and proud to help out with anybody else's fundraising campaign for Fallout for Hope. Over the moon to help. I will do anything. If there's another Junkashine run, if there's a, whatever, if there's a performance of some sort that somebody wants me to lend my voice to, whatever, I'm down. I will be more than happy to help. But I am not going to, I'm not gonna put myself out there and run my own campaign, because I will not, again, move the needle, using that term that I overuse, and I'll feel bad about it. So I'll try to find other ways that I can help. But that's I don't know. I need to figure out a way to stop feeling bad about myself about this stuff, and I realize that's much more easily said than done. But I know that's one of my like probably, certainly one of my greatest personal flaws is how I how personally I take things and how I seem to go out of the way. And if it's still on, this is something that she has told me over and over, that I go out of my way to get my feelings hurt. And I'm better about that. She has made me better about that. She has made me better about a lot of things. It's difficult to overstate how important she is to me, and how important she's been to my my growth as a person. Just having her in my life has been something it's been a big deal, and it's she's made me a much better person. She's made me want to be a better person. So that's one of those. Like I said, the best thing that came out of this was the fact that she's a part of my life now. Having her as a friend, her friendship has been a huge thing. So that she's helped me in that's one specific area where she's helped me, because she's helped me to recognize when I'm doing it, which sometimes before that I would do it and I would spiral. But what she'll do is, if she sees it, she'll sort of grab me by the shoulder and be like, knock it off. Stop being an idiot, in a caring way. But those kinds of things. So she's helped me recognize those things about myself, where maybe I knew them subconsciously, but she shined a light on them in a way that's allowed me to start to work on them, to stop doing those things, or at least to improve that part of me. So I'm assuming she's not on anymore, because she probably would have said something when I started talking about that. But maybe it's better that she's not. But that's that's the thing. We all have our hang-ups, and we'll see what happens. It's getting late. I'm about 2 hours in, and it was a fun talk. I'm glad I was able to get my technical glitches worked out, and I think I know what happened. I think that the issue was a network issue, because I have load balanced internet here at home, and I think that it was defaulting to the cable connection, which is supposed to be the backup connection, and the upload speed on that is really bad. My main connection's fiber, and I think that was the problem. So I changed my my load balancing configuration a little bit, and I think that fixed it. So that's it. But yeah, no, Northern. I mean, I don't I don't talk about her publicly much, but I mean, I express privately to her how important she is and has been to me, and I do try to make sure that I spread the gospel of how great a person she is, because she really is. I mean, she's one of the best people I've met in a long time, and anybody who's interacted with her already knows that. So I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't know already, but that's pretty cool. I don't know if I'm doing any more script walkthroughs. If I do, I don't think I will do them over the next few months, because I do want to stay away from doing anything show related, except like I mentioned, anything that happens to come up, but sort of starting anything myself, I'm probably not going to do anything like that for the at least for the next few months. And it's possible, even if I decide not to continue, maybe that's something that I can that I'll end up doing. I don't know. But it is interesting to do that. It's fun to do, especially because I guess sometimes I have the memory of a goldfish, especially if I'm listening to something that is from an episode that's like from season one. I will have forgotten a lot of it. Like when I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that. But like if you ask me to say, hey, what happens in episode 5? Give me the beat by beat. I'd be like, I have no clue. Like, I would have to look at the script again because I do not remember. So in a way, it's, I'm sort of rediscovering a lot of the stuff myself. So, you get some real time reactions to, to the stuff in that episode because I haven't thought about it in such a long time. And also having a little bit more perspective, going over again, if I say I was talking about episode 5 from season 1, I can look at it from the perspective of season 2, and the way that everything that happened throughout season 2 in terms of how my creative process changed or anything like that. So it's cool, and it is fun to do. But again, it's one of those things where if I decide not to continue doing the show, it's because I don't think anybody's. It would be because I don't think anybody would care enough to continue to listen, and in that case, I don't think anybody would care to listen to a script walkthrough either. So it's probably going to come out. Yeah, that's probably how it would play out. But we'll see. I mean, I don't want to. It sounds like I'm speaking negatively about that stuff, and that's not my intention. I'm not trying to imply that I'm leaning toward not keeping going. Look at LeBron James, right? LeBron James had a tough season. They just got eliminated from the playoffs, and despite the fact that he's long said he's like, I want to stick around long enough to play with my son, and his son is going to be coming in not next season but the season after into the NBA. And yet after that tough series loss, he was like, I got to think about my future because he's tired. He put himself through a lot, and you can't have your perspective is going to be skewed when you're like that. He was physically hurt, he was emotionally drained, he was tired, and that's how your thought process is going to be. So that's why I don't make decisions without giving myself a long run of time away. And that's what I'm going to do again this time. I'm still not trying to imply that I'm leaning toward not continuing, despite saying that about LeBron and all that kind of thing. I'm just saying you don't have the right kind of perspective when you're done. You just don't. So I recognize that, and I'm putting that part of it out of my head until the time comes to really start thinking about it in earnest. So, like if I start up again, I'll probably have the first episode released in October. I released the bonus episode at the end of September for International Podcast Day, so I would probably do something like that. But sorry, my nose is stuffed up because I was crying talking about Vit. Yeah, that would probably be how the schedule would work out. And if I could be a little bit more efficient in the way that I wrote, because that was one thing that I just found myself. It was hard. It was hard to get a real rhythm with writing scripts, and I ended up writing most of them in a few days. Like I mentioned that I wrote the season 1 finale in 3 days, which was a total outlier because I usually wrote the scripts over the course of a couple of weeks. But this season, I ended up procrastinating, and I wrote most of them in probably 3 or 4 days. Which honestly is what I was more used to from doing TV stuff, because there was a lot more pressure to get stuff done fast. So maybe that was better, and I think that in a lot of ways the writer was richer and fuller. So maybe it works out better, but we'll see. But the reason I mention that is if I can be a little bit more efficient in the way that I write, then that opens me up time wise to do more of those kinds of walkthrough episodes or mini-sodes even, those kinds of things. So we'll see how things shake out. But a lot of stuff there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of stuff that's in flux right now, and that's going to inform what I can do, what I'm willing to do. And I'll say, if the stuff that I'm talking about obliquely, the stuff that I can't talk about directly, if nothing does come from that, I will say I'm going to be very hurt by that. I'm going to be upset about that. So if that does happen, it's going to make me feel like I don't want to be a creator anymore. but I'm conscious of that, and I my plan is, if, and again, fingers crossed, I'm hoping this isn't the case. I hope something does come out. But if it ends up being a no thank you, then I know that I'm going to have to build in some time to recover from that before I make a decision. Because if that happens, what I don't want to do is, I don't want to be in a position where I resent coming back to my unfunded passion project, because that's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to the people in the cast. It's not fair to the people that listen to the show. It's not fair to me. I'm not going to hate right, So uh, I'm going to have to build in some time to get that out of my head. If that happens, and again, I have no indication that that's what's going to happen. I definitely don't. I definitely hope that's not what's going to happen. But I have to recognize that as a possibility and understand the impact that that's going to have on me. That's one thing Lawrence said early on. He said, I'm very process oriented in the way that I approach things, and that's true. And one of the things about thinking that way is, you have to think about contingencies, and you have to think about possibilities. These are the things that could happen. How will those affect the way that the way that you look at things, and the way that how are, basically, what effects are going to cascade from this particular contingency? And I do look at that kind of thing. But that's basically it. So yeah, so it's 9 o'clock here in North Carolina. I've been on for 2 hours, which is great. I didn't know how long I'd talk, but Northern, you being here, and also the other folks that were here, I appreciate you keeping me company. And we'll see how it goes. I very much appreciate you being here. I appreciate your kind words, and I certainly appreciate all the support that you've shown me over the course of since you popped onto the scene. You have never been anything but incredibly supportive of me, of things I've done, and you're a great dude. You are, and I think that's you deserve every bit of success that you've had. And that's one thing that I can say universally throughout the Fallout community. Everybody that's been successful, I look at them and I'm like, man, they really deserve that. Like, you look at Kenny, or you look at Lawrence, you look at Ray and Lucy, you look at you. All these people, look, man, I'm happy for them. This is awesome. Because they're good people, and you like to see good people succeed. And that's been pretty awesome. But yeah, so I guess I'll end things there. I will leave this up if you want to see the first part that you missed before you came in. But that's pretty cool. And you can see I have the graphics on the screen. I know you know my Twitter accounts, but I am on Blue Sky. I have 2 accounts over there, and I'm trying to start posting more. It's definitely a different vibe over there, but I want to get in the rhythm of posting there, interacting with people and meeting new people and that kind of stuff. There's some pretty darn cool people over there. But that's it. So yeah, again, thank you very much for being here. I am going to stop the stream, and hey, I'm looking forward to what comes next too. whatever it is, and this probably isn't a surprise, but I did choose the title of the season finale deliberately. We cannot know what lies ahead, because I knew that I was not going to know what the future held for the show when the season ended. I knew that's my plan. So yeah, so we cannot know what lies ahead, and I guess we'll all find out together. But if we are coming back for a season 3, if I can come up with a story, because again, I left everything on the table for season 1, and then had to figure out what to do for season 2. I did the same thing in season 2, so if there's a season 3, I'm gonna have to come up with something. But I'll have some time to think about it if we do come back. And we'll all figure it out together. But yeah, thank you very much for being here, and again, thank you everybody for all your support. We'll see.